First of all, welcome everyone. Happy to see a lot of people here. My name's Nathan. Sort of the way we'll do this today is a quick introduction. I'll hand over to Jan and Andrei to give their introductions as well. Then we want to talk a little bit about, obviously, community building. So like I said, my name's Nathan. I've been in gaming for about 10 years. Had a serious games company that failed rather slowly and unspectacularly. Then I've been at Xsolla for around 3 years since then. Just quickly on Xsolla, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the brand everywhere. We're on a big push to help developers all across the spectrum. So as we go through this, I'll be talking about some of our products and trying to sprinkle in a little bit of promotion, but predominantly this is meant to be an educational session. We'll finish up with around 5 minutes, maybe a bit longer of Q&A at the end of this, and if we need to maybe take some more questions outside, we're happy to do that. So with that in mind, I'll hand over to Jan first. Jan, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're looking for here at DevCom and Gamescom?
Absolutely. So hey again, my name is Jan. I'm the business development manager at ByteRocker Games, a small size Berlin indie game studio. And before I joined them, my typical career start was in QA, like many folks. But I quickly moved into business development, worked at a publisher called Gamigo Games, did some game scouting for them, signed some games, MMOs predominantly. Stuck around for like 8 years or so, and then moved over to an investor and accelerator called Global Top Round. And living on the other side, so trying to get publishing deals for development studios out of the investment portfolio, also part of the investment committee. And this June I joined the first indie studio. And as business development manager, my goal here at the conference is to mostly talk and pitch our games to publishers. We have a couple of games to pitch. So Andrei, we might need to have a quick chat after this session, but we're also acting as kind of an independent publisher for other studios. So we have 2 studios that we're publishing, which is once Let Them Trade from Spaceflower Games, also Germany-based studio, and Tile Rush from Sparrow Games, also Berlin-based studio. Yeah, and then happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course, Jan. Andrei, over to you.
Hey guys, my name is Andrei. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Forklift, which is a specialized publisher for what we call systemic games, which is deep, smart, endless indie games, of which there's a lot of them in city building, in management, and automation. Like a lot of these games are falling under our umbrella. Before that, I actually started in the industry as a programmer, as a developer, many, many years ago. To give you an idea, the first game I've done was for PlayStation 2. So since then, I ran my own studio for mobile. I got disillusioned with that. I entered Tiny Build and was running the publishing division back then for almost 5 years. And spent a little time with the Games Fund at the investment side of things, like Jan here. And back to where I am right now, it's Forklift and systemic games, and this is what we do for indies. We started, it's a baby of a company. We started last year. We successfully released the first game, and we're looking for more stuff in the same space. Let me know if you have anything like that. Glad to be here and glad to talk about community, because for us specifically, community is bread and butter and foundation of almost any games we work on. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big challenges everyone recognizes is this issue of discoverability. So I think roughly around 10,000 games got released on Steam last year. 90% of them made less than $10,000 in a given year. Typically, the 15 to 20% of the highest grossing games are going to be new games. So not only are you competing with a huge amount of new content, you're also competing with a lot of legacy games for people's attention. And this is attention that's divided not just across gaming, but obviously across Netflix and all of these other places where everyone's trying to get you kind of interested. So when we think about community, I think it's a little bit more than just kind of that audience. It's how you engage with them and things like this. And I think always a good place to start with these types of conversations is a kind of, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you guys have seen around community building in your careers? So maybe Jan, if you want to just kick off some of the things you most commonly see people misunderstanding or getting wrong when it comes to building a community.
Well, one of the biggest factors is definitely showcasing the game far too late in its development, because you want to be early. You want to be very on the offense, more or less, because you cannot just, back like maybe 10 years ago by now, just hide somewhere in a garage, in a basement, keep developing, keep building, and then just pop your game out of nowhere. And also publishers are nowadays, they're looking at the track record, like which kind of community have you built already and can we build on that? Is there any sort of traction whatsoever? Because they also have to think not only twice, but 3 times or 4 times nowadays before they pick up a project, because there's so much content out there, not only launching, but being built, because everything's nowadays so accessible, which is great, but it also means that you have a lot of competition. And while publishers, they will always talk about unique selling points, it's very hard to build something that is truly unique nowadays. And so you want to validate that with your community, especially, and Andrei will touch on that probably also a little bit. If you're building big games, if you're building system-driven games, if you're building online multiplayer games, you need to test them, not only QA-wise, but you need the feedback, you need the data from the people. And you want to start out as early as possible, because this is also where you recruit your ambassadors that will help you on your journey to build a big, wide, global audience. And you want to basically go out of your shell and not only focus on the people that are in your country and focus, obviously you want to focus on the people that like playing your game. If you have a very hardcore game, you're not going out to a casual audience, for example. I think that's pretty clear, but also identifying who's your audience and finding the right space there also among content creators. Not to go too broad now, but yeah.
Yeah, so Andrei, when we were preparing for this, one of the things that was really interesting to hear from you, because you're working games with emergent gameplay, we were sort of discussing how often the developers themselves don't even fully understand where this is going to go and how communities and the players are going to use what they're putting together. And one of the things that came out of that was really interesting touch point is how your relationship with the community changes over time. And when you need to get started early, you have a very different goal and relationship with the community compared to when you're, in maybe early access or looking to release. So could you talk a little bit about that and how you view that?
Yeah. First of all, totally agree with you on what Jan said. This is probably the most common and the worst mistake you could do is like that you don't show the game to anyone until it's like too late. One of the worst things that you may have as a producer or a publisher is when you get a game pitched to you and you see the pitch, you see the game, you play it maybe, and you realize that somebody like a really talented team has spent like months, maybe years on that game, and you see that unfortunately it's pretty much unmarketable. You won't be able to like spin it in the right way because of the like how the setting is done, some of the themes in the game, how the game looks like, what are the combination of genres. Obviously, you might argue that any game can become a hit after all, but after you see like hundreds and hundreds of games on the market, you become a bit more in sync with what's going to be more successful, less successful, and some of the games are going to be really hard to sell. So, and now you have to break like the dreams to developer, and you don't want to do that because like you're not an asshole, but then you still want to help them. Anyway, back to your question. So in terms of different stages of engagement, I think one of the things with the community is that they're not your audience. Like there are players who you're going to sell the game on the later stages of marketing cycle, which are going to be just your almost like passive audience. But the community that you have in the beginning, those like hundreds or maybe thousands of people who are going to be on your Discord, you have to think of them not just as players. They are your, almost co-creators, like collaborators, because they're going to be super engaged. If they like the game, if they like you as a creator, if they like you as a studio, they're going to be really engaged with you, and they're going to give you a lot of feedback. They're going to spend their time playing the game for nothing, just because they want to be part of that journey you have. So you have to treat them differently rather than just players. There are your people who are spending the time to help you improve the game. And so in the cycle of development, I've seen some really talented teams done really smart things where they would have a social media account, Twitter or anywhere else, way before there's even a Steam page. So, and one person, maybe someone would say like, oh, not having a Steam page and already marketing your game, this is you're losing your wish list and stuff. But what they did actually is that they started explaining what the game is going to be. They started making some screenshots, testing different characters, different settings, different looks, different animations, and seeing what sticks. And they, with just that, with those visuals, with those ideas, they collected the first audience of a few hundred people. And then they started sending surveys. Like, here's the survey, like 5-10 questions. What do you imagine this game to be? What are the mechanics? Who are going to be the character? What are the what is the session time. So obviously, some of the people in the audience, well, not in the community, are not professionals. They're not going to perceive that from their like producer's mind, but they're still going to give you an idea of what the game they imagine, and then you can use that data to shape whatever you want to build. So once you have this data, then you continue shaping up your screenshots, and then suddenly you have a Steam page up, and you're letting them know that's the game, and now you already have a few hundred people already engaged enough to just go there, wishlist the game, tell their friends, and then Steam will go to see that as attraction, and they're giving you even more organic from the Steam. So that's just one of the ways you can use them early on, and not doing that, I think, in the era of like social media and complete openness and all these tools available. That's just, I don't know. I don't think that's unsmart. So I think everybody should try and do that.
Yeah, there's a real balance, isn't there, between kind of getting that feedback and not torching a Steam page or whatever else you might have. And I think what's really interesting here is at the beginning you're talking about the feedback loops. So you're not expecting anyone to buy anything from you or commit to buying anything, but you're really looking to that audience to validate the ideas that you've got. Full disclosure, Xsolla has a launcher that's free to use, so you can A/B test in that if you don't want to put a Steam page up. But what's interesting here, I think, as well, is this idea that we spoke about preparing, which is the idea of a minimum viable audience. And how do you think about, as on the publishing side, the difference between, say, community engagement and community size? Because at different points of your journey, they offer very different value to you. You can have a stack of people in your Discord, but if they're not engaging with anything you're doing, it's not really valuable to you that early in the process. So maybe, Jan, do you want to talk a little bit how you think about these two metrics and how they shift over time?
Absolutely. And what we're doing right now with one of our games, we're doing a lot of A/B testing on Twitter, so buying Twitter ads and seeing where we can get the people engaged from. And when you compare the size versus the engagement, obviously you can go to territories where there's a lot of people, like India or Asia, but the engagement might be very low because you don't have necessarily everything localized yet, which I would also suggest localizing your Steam page at the very least into as many languages as possible, and maybe even using AI-supported tools to do that, because it will help at least draw that attention. The community engagement obviously is a different thing, because if you don't have the right people that speak the necessary languages, it will be a little bit more difficult, especially if you're not on regional channels like in China, if you're not on Bilibili and so on, or if you're not on Kakao, then it's going to be more difficult. But it also depends obviously on the type of game that you're building. So obviously it started from the MMO space, so building communities is a little bit different there. The size actually matters, especially if you are in free-to-play, and you know it from the mobile side as well. And I feel like both there's more sides than just, premium and free-to-play, of course, but they inform each other, and you're taking best practices from one industry over into the other, because back in the day, why would you A/B test for a premium game that you're selling at the end and there's no long-term goal for it? Because you also still only get one shot and you want to make that count. And we still very much love engaging with the very passionate communities over in Latin America, for example. But we also know they will buy the game at a very low price, at a very huge discount, just because their buying power is not as strong. But that doesn't mean we don't care about the people, because most of our games nowadays are built for a global audience. And we obviously also try to make them accessible as possible. I think this is also a huge point for games nowadays, no matter how core these games are, that people can actually get into it, understand it. And for us, since we're mostly working on the premium side, the size is not as important as for a free-to-play game, for example. But yeah, as you mentioned, discoverability is super hard. It's still important because we're not building these games obviously out of passion, and a lot of creativity goes into them, but it's also a commercial endeavor, because if they're not commercially successful, we can't keep doing what we love doing. And like Andrei mentioned, it also like a community, the customer is king, but I hate saying customer in this case.
Yeah. So maybe a hypothetical for you, Andrei, to kind of bring home this point. You've got two games, very similar studios, very similar ask, similar gameplay. Let's say to carry this hypothetical, it's the same game. One studio come to you and they've got 10,000 people in a Discord. The other one's got 2,000. What factors would make you actually prefer the group with the 2,000? So what would you need to see from that studio with a smaller overall following to make you actually believe that this game has a higher chance of success, all other things being equal?
I get a simple quiz though. It's engagement. I'm going to give an example from another area that is also community related. when we market our games, obviously content creators and working with them and engaging them early is also a huge part of that. And so our core creators that we reach out way in advance and start talking with them with the game, explain how we are going to develop it, and we want them to be included sometimes even in a playtest, which is a big deal for a Forklift. This is just a lot of what we do on different levels. And so a lot of these creators that we have in our core list are people who have less than 100 subs on YouTube, right? So it doesn't sound as impressive when you are like maybe approaching this from like out, not thinking this about too much, seeing that maybe you need somebody with 3 million subs, 5 million subs, maybe they're going to be better for your game. But once you actually do this a couple of times, you're going to realize that these creators with less subs, they convert into views and convert into engagement, into actual clicks and purchases on the game much better. Like it's just such a better ROI that you have on working with these creators than you have with those variety streamers, or just like even the niche streamers or creators that have just bigger audience, because a lot of these people in the audience, they already come to watch the actual guy or gal who are the creator and not the game they're playing. They just enjoy them as a showman, right? So the same thing applies to the game here. Like imagine we have a game where there's 10,000 people in the community. That's impressive. That's actually really good. That's way above the average. But then you need to see who are these people and how did you get them? Like it's the same, again, another example is like wish lists and followers on Steam. You can have those wish lists gotten from a huge push on one of the festivals, and you got a lot of wish lists from people playing the demo, from people playing, seeing the trailer, and then in the end, when you start selling the game, you realize that these not convert as well as those organic ones who are engaged in a different way, who maybe are part of the community, who are following you for a long time. So basically, I can imagine a situation easily where I see a game with 10,000 people, and then I actually opt for a smaller community, a smaller game, because of some things in the game itself, in the team itself. We also look past just the community size. We also look at the, is the team collaborative? We actually, at Forklift, we have a special scoring system for when we sign a game, that we look at this from a few different pillars, including like the team, the product, the market, and the opportunity itself. So within each pillar, there's a lot of things that we just look at, score, and then we just see, well, it looks like this is something that we want to sign, despite let's see what kind of a deal we can get at this.
Was there anything you'd add to community engagement? What do you guys look for in terms of engagement? Because I think it can be sometimes misunderstood. It's like, well, just more is always going to be better because they've got a bigger number here. We're just going to calculate a conversion rate at X%, and we do that across this genre of game. And if you've got more, then as a publisher, I'm only ever going to be interested in more. What do you kind of look for when you're looking for engagement?
Yeah, for us, it's a little bit different because the games that we're building, they're not staying within the same market segment. So for us, it's even harder. We're not staying within the same segment, so we cannot capitalize on building a community that we can then take from game to game. We're still doing it in a ways where we combine our Discords, for example, and our social media channels, because otherwise it will create a lot of overhead that we have one single page for each and every game. And we still have a very small marketing team compared to what we're doing in terms of development. And so engagement is super important because we're still trying to use our portfolio and also our back catalog. We're still trying to make these games sell as well. And now that we're picking up also as a publisher a little bit, I would say it's also important that we have, like Andrei said, that content creators see the opportunity, no matter how small they are, that they can also grow with these games. And the feedback that I mentioned before is so super valuable because the games that we're working mostly on right now, they have a roguelite nature, they have a replayability in mind, and balancing is a huge thing for us as well. And the data can come either from the direct feedback, so surveys, as Andrei mentioned, but also continuous pressure, obviously, from the community that we have to put content out there. Obviously, it goes both ways. We want to attract as many people as possible, but that also means we need to put out as much content as possible. And but it's been working great so far. And obviously, there's certain things where you say, like, okay, I want to try TikTok now, for example. And the engagement in terms of view might be super high, but the conversion is fairly low from TikTok itself. But still, with all of these different channels, you have to try it first, and you cannot stop super early, because especially with a platform like TikTok, you have to go out of your bubble. You have to get picked up by an international audience first, because most of the time you're region capped kind of, and only when you show some traction you go outside. So it not only works with Steam, but it works with all the social media platforms as well. But you also want to see like, okay, where is my audience? And that again for us might differ from game to game. So one game might be more popular over TikTok. One game might be popular more in terms of long form videos, for example, on YouTube. But then it's also the comments, the likes and everything, not just the pure views. Because there's a lot of marketing and PR agencies out here, and most of them are also very good. And they say like, oh, you can get like, if you're going to Gamescom, the opening night live, you're going to get like 20 million views. But what does that translate to? Sure, people know about your game, but unless you want to really build a big brand, then, you're not going to see that as sales in the end, unless...
Especially after you see the price tag on the ONL thing, you're going to pass anyway. I don't... but anyway, it's too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a studio. I recognize that I need to build a community. I recognize that I need to build it early. I understand that I'm really craving engagement rather than just big numbers. Let's say I've got less than 10 people, 5 people. What do I do now? What would you guys kind of recommend? Should I get someone from outside to come in and run the community? What happens then when I get a publisher? Does this person stay with us? Should I be doing it as the co-founder? Should the person that's most involved in the game design, like who, how?
It's super difficult, especially if you're starting out as a small studio, right? So most of the small studios, they start with maybe like 2 or 3 people. And I would say like the majority of those people, they are very like, they are programmers, artists. So you don't necessarily have that knack to go out, and you might not be an extrovert. So it's even harder. So you need to first identify the right person within your team who can take care of this community interaction, the community engagement, going out there, posting stuff, responding to stuff. And in the best case, this is not the CEO on paper, because at the end of the day, unless it's like a hobby project, you're also building a company, right? And you as the CEO, you might be super engaged and you want to do that. But as the project grows and also as the team hopefully grows, you get other responsibilities, and you need to keep the lights running. You need to keep the operations intact. You need to make sure that the company is something where people want to stay, so that they can be creative, that they have this freedom, that they can bring their A game basically. And so you need to identify either a person among your team, or you need to find somebody who you can hire, or you need to go outside. There are a lot of external agencies that do that for you. And I know we did that at Gamigo back in the day for customer support. It was not the best solution, but then again, this was MMO, free to play. And there was just a certain distance between the players, the development teams, and the external support agency. But if you're a small team, if you have somebody in-house, that's the best. If they're on your payroll, it's usually a little bit cheaper, I would say. Finding the right person and the transition, right? You spoke about that. So my train of thought, I picked it back up. Perfect. I mean, this can change, because not all of the publishers necessarily offer like the full service deal, and they still want to have you involved in the marketing, for example. So they still need you, and they still need your input from when you initially build the community to translate that a little bit and to help transition to the publisher and make sure that you're speaking with one voice as well. So this could be your internal liaison with the publisher then, for example, or an additional QA person. Most of the time QA community management is a little bit shared if you're short on resources. But I don't know, Andrei, how do you do it usually?
We play it very much by ear. As an indie publisher, you got to be, I think flexibility is one of the biggest values that you can have in your DNA as a publisher. We chat with the team, and then we look at their strengths. What are they best at? Are they really good at social media? Are they good at being like on live streams and playing the game? Do they like that activity? Do they want to go to the shows? What is their forte? Are they comfortable doing this and that? And then we just decide. Some teams are actually in charge of their own players. Trailers. So they somehow have a knack for that specifically. And then in that case, we just say, okay, you do that. We're going to help you with some advice, some of the production muscle that we have, but then you're in charge of that. Just do that. Same thing applies to running Discords, running social media, going to events, running playtests. We're going to be ready to take over anything that developers feel like should be on our plate. It's a part of our early conversation, how we structure the way we work. And like I said, we play it by ear. So some teams are much better at social media. Some of them are not that well. So at Forklift, one of the important things for us is that we're building this unified audience. The reason we're focusing on systemic games that we found that people who play city builders, management game, tycoon games, strategies, simulations, a lot of these games, they have a huge overlap, like much bigger than you would see in a usual your generalist indie publisher's portfolio. So the people who play city builders, they might stay and play something else in your portfolio. So because we specialize, we know how to approach these players, we know how to find them, we know where, like how to speak to them. And so when we run the community, we run it from that perspective of these are the people who are part of our overall like fans of Forklift audience. That's the idea.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I know, like, just with the community, with Xsolla, we help you sell directly to your players, and one of the most powerful things we've seen to drive that increased revenue by having that direct relationship with the community is when the developers just go to their community and say, guys, if you buy from us, it helps put more money in our pocket. And that's very, very powerful, and there's not a lot of industries where you can be that kind of open, I think, with the people that follow you. So Sally's pretty mad at me because we're taking too long, so...
Sorry.
To kick us out pretty quickly. Do we have time for a question? We've got to flip the room. So if you've got questions, we'll be outside. Hope that was interesting.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks for having us.
Get it.